Alright guys, here's the plan for the day today. We're going to be starting to talk about our cycles from our systems and cycles unit. Now the reason why these cycles are so important is because when we go to the river, you're going to need to know and be able to kind of see where these cycles are, how they're working, how they might be impacted by us and the community around the river. So we're doing a little bit of background information to help us with our river project. Now today we're going to focus in right here on the water cycle. Should be review for you guys. So this video should go pretty quick. Another one that should look a little familiar is the carbon cycle. The nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus cycle are going to be probably new for you guys, so make sure when we go through those three cycles that you take your time, you ask questions, do what you need to do to understand those cycles. Because they are going to be kind of new for you guys. All right. So let's get into the water cycle. Now the water cycle is driven by two things. It's driven by one of our best friends, the sun, and then another one of our best friends, gravity. Okay. These two things are pretty much the two main players in the water cycle. All right. What I'm going to do in this next slide is I'm going to go through some of the different processes that you guys must know, should be review. What I want you guys to do though is as I go through each of the different processes, think about how the sun might impact that process, or maybe it's not the sun. How does gravity impact that process? All right. So sun, gravity, two main players. Keep those in mind as we go through the water cycle. Now, Earth is a closed system. What that means is all of the water that you see here on Earth, okay, we don't get more of it, doesn't disappear into thin air, doesn't do anything like that. So what it's going to do is it's going to jump around from sphere to sphere, interacting as it goes, all right? Now this water cycle diagram is pretty complicated. The one that you guys are going to need to know, be able to draw, be able to label is going to be a little bit more clear. It'll only have a few of the processes, and I'm going to go through those now. Since the water cycle is a cycle, really I could start anywhere I wanted and end up back where I started. Now I like to start with evaporation. All right. Now evaporation, okay, you should know is the process of going from liquid water, so liquid to gas, right? Okay, so we're going to take liquid water, whether it's in the ocean or river or lake, okay, maybe it's snow that's melted snow, and what we're going to do is we're going to put that up into the atmosphere. All right, now which main player is doing that? It has to be our buddy right here, the sun. What the sun's going to do is it's going to take this water particle, or these water molecules down here, okay, and these water molecules are bonded together. Okay, and what the sun's going to do is it's going to give these water molecules enough energy for them to make their way up into the atmosphere, break away, give them a lot of energy so that they're rambunctious and they can go into the atmosphere. Okay, that's evaporation. Once that water goes into the atmosphere, it's just going to want to keep going higher and higher and higher. What you should know is that as you go up through the atmosphere, the temperature decreases. Now these rambunctious water molecules are losing energy as it goes up through the atmosphere, and eventually those water molecules are going to condense, or we're going to have the process of condensation. Condensation, evaporation, very much related. They're kind of opposites, right? So if evaporation is taking liquid water, turning it into gas, condensation is going from a gas to a liquid. All right, so these two are kind of opposites of each other, and that liquid now is going to be in these clouds. All right, and eventually that liquid is going to become so heavy that it's going to fall to the earth in the form of precipitation. All right, so now we're over here. Now that precipitation could be rain, it could be snow, sleet, hail, whatever. All right, going back to our two main players, right? Who is in charge of precipitation? It's got to be gravity. Okay, so precipitation is led by gravity. Okay, because gravity is pulling that water down just like it's pulling you in your seat, keeping you in your chair right now, all right, or keeping you here on Earth. Okay, now that precipitation, once it hits the ground, has a lot of different options. Okay, it can either hit the surface and run off. That's another process that you guys are going to need to remember, runoff. Okay, and runoff is just where water hits the ground, doesn't go into the ground, and it just kind of travels along the surface. It can either go into rivers or lakes or go back into the ocean. Or that water can infiltrate into the ground. Key part of the word right there, in. Okay, kind of think of like a Brita filter, right? Okay, it trickles down into the ground. So after precipitation, we can have that water run off the surface, go to a bunch of different spheres, or it can go into the ground, recharge our groundwater. All right. Now the last little piece of this comes from plants. And what it's going to be called is this big fancy science word, evapotranspiration. Now if you break it down, you should see that evapotranspiration starts with evapo, same thing over here for evaporation. So hopefully you understand that evaporation and evapotranspiration, same process, taking liquid water and turning it into water vapor or a gas. Now the only difference is this part right here, because it happens in plants. All right, evapotranspiration, or sometimes I'll just call it transpiration, happens in the leaves of plants after that water has been soaked up into the plant itself. All right. So key things you guys need to remember are going to be evaporation, condensation, precipitation, infiltration, runoff, and evapotranspiration. All right? Okay. So this slide right here talks a little bit more about those two key players, how solar energy is in charge of that transpiration and evaporation process. Okay, so you can kind of relate those three things together. And then down here, gravity pulls that water back as precipitation, but you should also think that gravity is also going to pull that water into the ground, and it's also going to be part of runoff as well. That water that's hitting up here in that high mountain is being pulled down the surface by gravity, and that water that goes into the ground is being pulled into the ground by gravity. Okay, so every single process that you need to know is either run by the solar or the sun, or is run by gravity. Okay, always keep that in mind. Now eventually you're going to need to be able to do something like this. I've got a picture right here for you, a whole bunch of different letters, and what I'm going to ask you guys to do right now is figure out what process A through G represents. Can you label those? I want you to do that in your notes, probably over on the question side of your notes. Label A through G. What I want you to do is pause the video, go through, label everything. Okay, if you need to use your notes, that's what they're there for. Use your notes. That's perfectly okay. When you're done labeling A through G, unpause or play the video again, and I'll go through the answers. Hopefully what you've figured out is that A is precipitation, so this is precip right here. B is that transpiration. C also could be transpiration. It's okay if you said that it was evaporation, but really evaporation happens here from the water itself. D is runoff. F is going to be your infiltration. G is also going to be your infiltration as well. All right. So make sure you're able to do that on a quiz or a test. I'll have a picture similar to this, and you'll have to label every single one of those processes. All right. So this is nice practice for you guys. Now, here's where the river project kind of comes into play a little bit. All right. How we actually impact the water cycle itself. Now, I know you guys know that we can impact water by polluting it and all that kind of stuff, but I want you guys to kind of look at how we impact the cycle, where the water is in the different parts and the processes themselves. Okay, so what you can kind of see in this picture is the result of developing land. Okay, now developing land, all that means is building houses, building malls, putting up a whole bunch of parking lots, making roads. Okay, and if you think about it, all that is pretty much concrete. Concrete doesn't allow water through it like the ground does, like soil does. So if the water isn't infiltrating right here, what it's going to be doing is it's running off. If it's running off the surface, then we run into problems like this. We can have soil erosion. You can see that in this picture. This water is that nasty brown color. That brown color is that soil. It's moving the soil from here down the stream. Okay, the plants need that soil. We can lose groundwater. Now, you might not think that groundwater is overly important, but that's where we get our drinking water. Okay, so if we're putting all of these roads and buildings in, what we're actually doing is decreasing the amount of drinking water that we have. Can lead to flooding. Obviously, you can see that in this picture, and also pollution of lakes and streams. And we'll also kind of get into the effects of this in the other cycles as well. Now, there are a couple other things that we can impact the water cycle. And you guys are going to get a taste of my drawing. All right. So let's say we've got an area that's pretty hilly. Okay. Now, normally when it rains here, okay, so we have some rain coming down. That rain is going to hit the ground and it's going to run off the surface, right? Okay, because gravity is pulling it down. It's not going to infiltrate very much, so we're only going to get a little bit of grass on the surface here. And there's not a whole lot of water there to grow trees or anything like that. But let's say instead of this, people want to live there because it's so nice, and we're going to turn it into this. All right. What that means is all that rain that used to fall there is going to, instead of running off and going down into a river or something like that, that rain is going to infiltrate into the ground, okay, which is going to increase the amount of groundwater that we have, right? But if people want to live here, we're going to be putting up houses. So here's a house, little door, right? Okay. But again, remember, that's concrete. That is not going to allow this to happen, so it will increase our runoff, all right? But here, the water, the ground's flat, so there might be more flooding there, right? Another thing we can do is we can change what's actually on the surface. So maybe normally this area has a lot of really nice flowers, right? Maybe lots and lots of tall grass. Maybe it's a field of corn or something like that, right? Now if it rains, what's going to happen to the water that goes into the ground? It's going to go up into these plants, right? Okay, so we're not going to have a lot of groundwater down here, but we'll have a lot of transpiration, stuff like that, right? Now what if we change that and turn this into, we cut all that stuff down and we've got, maybe a school or something like that. We got a school. Here's the flagpole with the flag, right? Okay, now again, rain is going to fall on surfaces that won't allow water to go through it, so we're going to increase the runoff. All right? So keep that in mind, how not only just changing one thing can impact other areas. All right? This is the key thing right here, how we're impacting the water cycle. You're going to need to not only know the processes that happen within the water cycle, but you need to know how we can impact that cycle and then be able to see that at the river. Those are kind of the important things you guys are going to need to remember about the water cycle. If you have any questions, make sure you ask. Otherwise, you can always re-watch this video as many times as you like.